Hello and welcome back to another episode of Marketing, Management, and Money. I am your host, Ryan Murray.
And I'm your host, Ryan Owens.
So today we're going to talk about something that's very pertinent to kind of the situation that's going on. Most of the time when we take on an episode, we try and do more evergreen content because we want to make sure that as you're listening to these episodes that you can come back to them and listen to them at any stage of your business, and they're going to have some value for that. And we're definitely going to cover some things that are going to be evergreen in nature, but we're going to kick off with a little bit of something that has pretty much affected the entire world, and that is that there has been this pandemic going on with COVID-19. It's shut down a lot of things, and what I really want to talk about, I don't want to talk about the pandemic. That's not at all where I want to spend the conversation today, but the economic impacts that have hit small businesses because of this pandemic, and so that's where I want to take this today.
Sure.
So one of the things that I want to point out, and I think that this is fundamental and foundational to this whole discussion, is the fact that sure, this is a global crisis. This has affected millions of people, probably maybe billions of people.
Oh, yeah, easily billions.
Oh, okay.
Affected in some way, shape, or form, whether that's their livelihood or otherwise, it's definitely touching billions of lives.
Right. And I want to look at how many small businesses just flat out got shut down.
Yeah.
And so here in the United States, and I apologize, I haven't really delved into what every single country is doing in response to this, but I can only imagine that it's very similar. But here in the United States, we pretty much have shut down all of the restaurant industry, all of the tourism industry. I remember that there was a health and beauty where they pretty much said, okay, that's all going to be shut down. And, so here we are, we're a couple months afterward. People are starting to crawl out of their hole. We've survived the great pandemic of 2020. People are starting to crawl out of their hole, but those industries were just pummeled.
Sure.
The government came in and shut them down. And sure, they said some things like, hey, we want you to, use takeout, and delivery from restaurants. And I'm like, that's cool and all, but that's, that's like less than a Band-Aid.
You're still slashing the economics of their whole industry.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't profit from bringing in super small amounts of food for that limited amount of delivery and having your employees work extra hard to make those deliveries in and out of the building, and it just doesn't make sense financially.
Yeah, and it's just tough. And the thing that I want to get to, that I was saying is fundamental, is that whereas this is wide scale, this is this is a big deal.
Oh, for sure.
However, small businesses face this same thing on a small scale all the time. You'll have a situation where you might have a local flood that is just absolutely going to destroy your business, or you get caught in an earthquake, or, there's civil unrest or economic unrest, or, something that comes in and just completely decimates your business. And so I kind of want to talk about not just what we're doing today as the world is recovering from this pandemic, but I really want to talk about what it is that you as a business can do to, safeguard yourself and to recover if you're one of those unfortunate ones that got blindsided. It's just you're walking down the street and all of a sudden, a freight train comes and just boom. You can't blame that and say, well, you should have managed better. It's like, well,
there's only so much you can do.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but I didn't anticipate a meteorite coming and crushing me. Yeah. How do I manage better? This isn't necessarily preventative management, but it's a recovery management. So I want to talk today about recovery management in your small business and, the different steps that you can do to help with that.
Awesome. And I think it's such, like you said, it's such a relevant topic for businesses, no matter what stage our economy is in or what stage their business is in. It's definitely something that you'll want to use throughout the life cycle of your business. As you continue to grow and mature as a business, you'll want to continue to put these placeholders in place or these thresholds in place to help the structure and foundation of your business be secure and sound as you're growing. Because this isn't like necessarily just preparing you food storage in your personal life, right?
Yeah.
This is like, okay, let's make sure that the supports of our business, the hypothetical supports of our business are solid, that they're constructed properly. Going back and double checking your hypothetical blueprints, making sure that you are on point, making sure that you add some of those safeties and securities, those safeguards in place, even if it is after the fact of when you should have done it in the first place, because we're all busy, right?
Yeah.
We all always have something going on. There's always something coming up, and it's so easy to be like, oh man, I'll get to that later. I mean, it's just like in your personal finances. If you're not making conscious effort to set aside money for a 401k or have an emergency fund or pay off debt or pay off student loans, put extra money towards X, Y, and Z. There's always something you can do with that money.
Yeah.
Your lifestyle will always grow. And that same thing rings true for your business. There will always, and I think even more so in small business and entrepreneurship, there's always exponentially more options of things you can do with any extra amount of money or new income that you have.
Yeah. And some great points were brought up there. And I just want to refresh the memory of some of our listeners. If you want to go, we did a whole episode when this first started to unravel. The whole crisis started to unravel. And we did an episode back in March that was managing your business despite chaos. And we really talked about how to safeguard your business, how to keep a cool head, how to manage correctly. And, a ton of information there. I want to take it to the next level.
Let's do it.
And I want to take it at this point. So let's assume that you did everything right. You played by the rules. You had your cash flow in check. Your balance sheet was organized. You were doing everything right. And all of a sudden, you find yourself completely out of business. And so I want to talk about some fundamentals that you can always fall back on to help you rebuild if you've been decimated. And so kind of not the lightest topic that we're going to cover, but an important one nonetheless.
Sure.
So the first thing that I want to point out is in times of crisis, there's always someone who is still making money.
For sure.
And that's an important concept for small businesses to realize, is that there's always somebody out there who is, they are actually doing a little bit better off because of this crisis, regardless of what the crisis is. Right now we're talking about recovering from the COVID-19, but, if there's an earthquake, if there's a flood, if there's, a lightning bolt that comes, I don't know, but
just one lightning bolt, just one economic downfall.
Yeah.
The world goes underground.
One lightning bolt. One lightning bolt. And
a big freaking lightning bolt, man.
The wrath of God. Boom, But there's always someone who is making money off of that. And so the question is how and why? So here's the first anomaly that I think is important to point out, and that is that money doesn't necessarily disappear. Now, the concept of money will disappear, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. That's a little bit high level, so just hold that thought. But tangible money itself does not disappear. And so it's changing hands. And so if all of a sudden you're no longer getting the money, who is? The interesting thing is if you study, like depressions and different things like that, there are actually a lot of people who become very wealthy during economic downturns. And the reason why is because the money is changing hands. And a lot of times when you talk about depressions or recessions or, these economic crises, the masses, the mass population are the ones that are, losing the money. And you oftentimes will have minorities or a small population that will start to amass the money, and they'll take the money and they will actually profit from them. And so if you're a small business trying to recover, the first thing that I would look at is I would look and say, okay, who out there is buying and what are they buying? You might have to reinvent yourself. You might have to take some of the experiences that you gained the first go around and say, all right, how am I going to reinvent myself? And I think of some of these large companies, that they've just done exceptionally well. Just off the top of my head, I look at like IBM computers that, they came out with a punch card system back in the early 1900s that was like the predecessor to computers.
Yeah.
And, during World War II, that punch card system was in high demand to keep things organized.
Yeah.
And they actually did really well despite the fact that everyone else, was going through a depression and then right into a major war, this company. And so you'll see BMW was another one that came out of kind of that time period where they profited because they were making a lot of the motors that were going into these war engines. And so you'll see a lot of these companies that, I look at General Electric. They started out with electricity. Today, they make most of their money off of medical devices, and they're even into the finance sector. And so, it's stuff that, they've changed, they've pivoted, they've altered what they've done. And so when times of trial hit, they don't just sit there and say, well, we could make more light bulbs. They start to expand and do a little bit more of, they broaden their scope, and they take the expertise that they have and they look and they say, okay, who's buying? How do I adapt to who's currently buying?
Yeah, and I think that there's a lot of preparation that goes into that, right? Like it's not just anybody that can come into that. You talked about that there are certain people that are positioned for that better than others.
Mm-hmm.
And
I think, and I'm sorry that I'm
I'm
kind of jumping in here. This to me is a passion, and so studying what people do when it really matters to me is just fascinating. And so I kind of jump in and cut you off, but
it's okay.
You were talking about being prepared, and it's like, yeah, if you had a strong business, what you still have, even if all of your assets are wiped out. If your customer base is gone, what you still hold is you hold expertise, you hold a knowledge base of how to run that business, and you hold kind of this mental, emotional fortitude to rebuild. And those characteristics, that knowledge, those things, that's not easily come by. That's something that you really have to earn that.
Yeah.
And so people who have gone through very difficult times and they're still fighting, man, first off, my hat goes off to you. And secondly, it's amazing to see what better ideas they can come up with, what new innovations they have, what better processes they are going to implement, because it's a clean slate. It's a starting point where they're like, okay, I can do this, but this time I know what I'm doing. I'm prepared this time, even though I have to start from ground zero.
Yeah. Well, and it's like, so I I keep thinking of the metaphor of like a professional athlete or somebody training for an Olympic event.
Okay.
Well, let's go with professional athletes. So say you're a college athlete and you're crushing it, you're at the top of your game, and you move into the NBA, and just when things start rolling with the NBA, all of a sudden they come out and, hey, we're canceling the NBA. I don't know why they would do that. This is just hypothetical.
Right.
We're canceling the NBA.
And that happened just a couple months ago.
Right. Well, touche. So all of a sudden, you have these highly athletic, strong individuals
Mm-hmm.
with nothing to do. You know, they're not playing basketball anymore. And so somebody that is trained to that level has a unique opportunity over somebody like myself who has never trained at that level, if there is a way for them to utilize their
As soon
skills.
as that door opens.
Yeah, and it's I mean, both he and I, or this person in the NBA, we can approach the same opportunity as soon as it opens, but if he's more well prepared for it, he's going to take it. And I think that's exactly what you're saying, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is like, as entrepreneurs, as small business owners, there are a lot of skills and experiences that we are having and growing. And yeah, we may not be having multi-million-dollar contracts to be an esthetician or auto mechanic or what have you.
You never know. I mean, we've got some businesses out there that.
Yeah. But, you're still, as long as you're pursuing and working toward excellence and being at the top of your game and pushing a little bit further and harder, like many entrepreneurs and small business owners do, it's just in their nature, right?
Mm-hmm.
They drive for that in one way or another.
Yeah.
It doesn't always look the same, but so often you find that in small business owners. But even if, like you're saying, even if this collapse happens or the rug gets ripped out from under us as small business owners, we're still prepared. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We're still capable of doing something better than somebody else who hasn't necessarily gone through the rigors of starting or going through a startup and turning it into a successful small business. And there's advantage to that. Mm-hmm. And so, it's a wise thing to keep your eyes open for more opportunities rather than getting stuck on, oh man, like I just lost everything. And
yeah. So, and that's something that I really want to, if I'm enumerating my points, this would be kind of my second big point, is that the best opportunity doesn't come when everyone thinks it's an opportunity. It comes before everyone thinks it's an opportunity. So
exactly,
if you're investing in something when it's hot, that's a bad investment.
Yeah.
You want to invest in something before it's hot because you want all of the growth of getting up there. So if you're in a recovery, if the markets have crashed, if your industry has crashed, if things are recovering, what will happen is most people, human nature is to kind of withdraw, to hold back. But that's the counterintuitive correct response is to actually jump forward. Now, there is some timing here because you can jump forward at the wrong time, but a lot of times what will happen is, and we're seeing it now, we went through this COVID-19 crisis, and we're starting to see this rebound, this rebuild. And I'm like, yeah, now's a good time to catch some opportunity because things are cheap. People are looking for work. People are scared. They're looking for leadership. Mm-hmm. If you can provide leadership right now, then that's what they're going to be interested in. And if you can jump on that initially, then you're going to be the one leading. If you're going to wait until some other leader takes that risk, you're a follower. And that's not a bad place to be unless you're trying to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah, exactly. Well, so I think it's an easy thing to reflect back in history and look at depression that occurred during the 1920s and 1930s, and draw some wise lessons from that time as well. And they reflect some of the things that you're talking about, when markets are down, things are cheap, you know what I mean? And so if you have any liquid assets, it might be a time to branch out into something that you've been wanting to try, or you think might be successful now that the balance of cost versus barrier to entry kind of out or weigh against each other, right?
Yeah.
But it's just like there's so many different examples that come up from that era, like KFC. Sorry, I couldn't think of it for a second. So
Colonel Sanders.
So he started selling chicken out of was it his gas station?
I'm not familiar with his story.
I think that he started, I'll have to look it up, but I think that he started selling chicken out of his gas station. And this was during the Depression era, right?
Okay.
So he starts selling this fried chicken out of his gas station. I'm pretty sure it was less than a decade later. He had like almost a 200-seat restaurant or something like that. And again, this is like from popular demand in the Depression era when people didn't have money, when people were scraping by, and that is so counterintuitive to me, right? Like people don't have food to put on their tables, and this fast food restaurant or this, well, I guess a sit-down restaurant was booming.
Yeah.
Right then, it's just super counterintuitive. But that's the thing with opportunities is like people aren't looking at it as an opportunity, right? It's the people who are prepared, whether with experience or financially or both.
Or just courage. They're just ready to jump
try
in.
Something new. Yeah. They see the costs are low, or they see an opportunity to lead or an opportunity to serve, and they just start doing it.
Yeah.
And it is like, this is the Depression, and all of a sudden you're serving chicken? Like, might not be the best time, bud. But
it worked out great.
I mean, yeah, exactly. History is what it is. Like, how many? I don't even know how many franchised stores there are or locations there are now. But getting into a KFC,
it's global.
Yeah, getting into a KFC or a McDonald's now, it's not a great investment compared to had you invested in that back in the 1930s or 1940s.
Yeah,
oh my gosh, your grandchildren's grandchildren would be all owning their own beaches in wherever. And
yeah. And so that kind of brings us to the third and final point that I want to make before we wrap up this episode. And I alluded to this earlier, and I said that money just changes hands. And I said, but there's kind of a concept of money that will change. And so I want to talk about that because, and I'm sure that there were some economists out there that were like calling my BS, and they're like, money doesn't just change hands, and I'm just like, I get it. I know. Let me explain. And I'm going to explain this from a small business perspective. If you think about money is nothing more than a concept.
Right.
If you hand me a piece of paper that has a 1 on it, I only think that that's worth as much as I think I can trade it to someone else, And so if you hand me a piece of paper that has a 50 written on it,
I can give this 50 to somebody else for something I want.
Why is this worth more than the 1?
Just so happens that we all buy into the numbers.
We're all believing that this has some value. So this is kind of, and economics overly simplified, I know, and there are some fundamental errors in what I'm explaining. It's the concept I'm going with.
This is the Pixar version.
This is the Pixar version. That's beautiful. So if that
would never work in real life. I know, but it's a movie. Just let it happen.
If I go to you and I say, "Hey Ryan, can I borrow $100?"
Sure. Let me
Sweet.
Just write that down here.
Okay. So you give me $100. I now have $100, but in your mind, you still think you have $100 because you're like, oh, if I need $100, I just go to Ryan and he pays me back my $100.
Yeah.
So by me asking for that money, the belief just doubled. Okay.
Yeah.
So we created $200 there because now I'm holding $100 and you still, you write it down as you're like, sweet, I have an IOU for $100. We just created $200 in concept. Okay.
Right.
Then I go and I purchase something with my $100. I go and buy some, climbing gear. All right. And now the person that I bought the climbing gear from, they have $100.
Mm-hmm.
But me, I now have a $100 asset of the climbing gear.
Right.
And you have an IOU of $100. Okay. And so we now just created $300. You see where I'm going with this, right? And like I said, I'm oversimplifying it. There's a lot that's going on. But then the person who manufactures the climbing gear, so the person who is going to sell that climbing gear, well, they've got to order that, and they're ordering it on the belief that I'm going to buy it.
Right.
And so they went ahead and they ordered this ahead of time, and so they gave $100 to the manufacturer. And so that, we're at 4 times. And I get that there's, some timing issue that I kind of overlooked there. Yeah. Don't get too technical.
Right. Of course. There's the costs and things that we're going. We get that. But the concept.
The concept is that $100 feels like $400.
Yeah.
Okay. But the second that store says, I don't think anyone's going to buy, I'm not buying from the manufacturer, he now shrunk it by $100. Well, then I go to the store to buy, and I find that the store doesn't have anything to sell. And so I'm like, okay, well, then I'm not buying from you. And that shrunk it by another $100. And you come to me and you say, hey, I need my $100 back, and I have to pay you $100. And so the concept of the money can grow and the concept of the money can shrink. The actual number
doesn't change.
Right. But the belief does.
Mm-hmm.
And so what will happen is during these tight times, people will believe that there is less money.
Mm-hmm.
How do you change that? By changing the belief. And that's it's kind of a high level concept. And I wish that we could go into this. In fact, maybe we should. Let's pick it up next episode with some of these belief systems of money and how you can use that into your business. But for now, let's go ahead and wrap this one off. I just want to say, go out there, be leaders, serve, have courage. I know it's tough. And if your business was one that got wiped out, we're sorry, but at the same time, you didn't get wiped out.
Yeah.
So build from what you are. You're smarter, you're stronger, you're a better person, which means you can build a better business. Take care. We'll see you next week.